The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. We would like to now hand over to the prosecutor to proceed with the questions he wishes to put to the witness. You may now proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two quick questions about what you said before the break, before we move on to a new subject. You said about the peasants who were living in Phnom Penh that they knew where to go. They left the city and they went out towards their villages. But what about the people who always lived in Phnom Penh? What were they supposed to do and where were they meant to go?
Response. I know about this only in general terms, that the people who were at the bases were expected to receive newcomers. Newcomers shall not be treated unfairly, and they were not discriminated concerning their choice of villages they would wish to go.
Monsieur le témoin, vous avez...
Mr. Witness, you said you came into Phnom Penh on the 17th of April 1975 from the Special Zone, Sector 15. How long did you stay in Phnom Penh after the city was liberated?
Some response. I returned the same night. I went there at 9 a.m. and at night time I took my motorbike to Sector 15. I did not spend a night in Phnom Penh.
When you went out in the evening on your motorbike, were there already long columns of people who were heading towards Udong, leaving the city already?
Response. Yes, I saw a lot of them leading to the direction. There were a lot of people in Phnom Penh before it was liberated, and people had to come out of their homes and flooded the roads.
Did the people who were on those roads look happy to leave Phnom Penh? Or was it difficult for them to do so?
Response. Based on the truth and fairness of all, people who had to move from their homes would never be happy. But according to the appeal during the wartime, people had no choice but to go.
I'd like to come back to the duties you had as the head of propaganda and indoctrination. You said you spent a certain amount of time in Siem Reap, and then you exercised the same duties in Zone 15 of the Special Sector, and then in Sector 32 of the West Zone, where you were in charge of propaganda. Is it fair to say that you acquired a good deal of experience in propaganda and in mass indoctrination?
Response. Allow me to tell you that my experience was in compiling texts to comply with what was needed. I did not know whether the text I wrote could be well received or not. It is beyond my understanding.
Mais tout à l'heure,
But just now you were saying that you had to carry out propaganda tasks among the population to convince them that they should support the movement. I believe I inferred that you were in direct touch with the population and not just in contact through written materials. Is that correct?
Response. Yes, it is. When it comes to the propaganda and indoctrination, there was a section where, or place where people could gather, and during break after the sessions we would get to know other people.
When you were working as head of propaganda, during these sessions, and during your contacts with the citizenry, did you have to always respect the basic lines and principles of the party?
Response. The line did not entail what was expected of the people, but in essence, people were expected to improve production, and that they were expected to be self-reliant, and also they had to do farming, to grow crops, to support themselves, and having left some to support others, including the military. So this is part of the policy, but I cannot remember the details of the strategic political line.
After 1975, were you still required to give true information to the masses when you were in contact with them? Is it fair to say that?
Response. Could you repeat the question?
dans l'accomplissement,
When you were performing your duties, I believe that it was important not to give the wrong information to the people. And so I'm interested in knowing what the party expected you to say to the masses each time you met them. Is it fair to put it like this?
ឆ្លងតាមអ្នកពំ
Response. Through the people who had to pass on the information to other, the information had to be well followed, and I had nothing to add on top of that, and I had nothing to hide from the people, because what I knew would be well informed to the people.
Est-ce qu'il y a
Were there various documents that you were supposed to study as a party member, as a cadre in the party, and also because you had to put a certain kind of message across to the people? Can you give us a few examples of documents that you had available to you to refer to when you did your propaganda work?
Response. The documents that I would like to present to you, that I would like to talk about to you, were mainly concerning the production of crops, concerning how to be self-reliant and self-mastery. My recollection is about that, and that's the essence of the documents I educated people on. And I also had to be more skillful in educating people on production, self-reliance, and self-mastery, and independence. And I had to be very careful before I could teach people on this. Otherwise, people could get very little from our sessions. Normally, ordinary people could find it difficult to understand this.
You were quite an important cadre in the Western Zone, handling propaganda in Sector 32, and as such, were you acquainted with the statutes of the Communist Party of Cambodia?
សូមឆ្លើយ
Response. The party statute was publicized internally, not externally. So not the whole party statute would be quoted. Cadre had their respective level, and I indeed was acquainted with the statute, but minimally. And I know for sure that I know my own business, and they know their own businesses. I did not have the gut to ask people for other business, and most importantly, the lower echelon had to obey or respect the upper ones.
If the chamber will allow me, Mr. President, I would like to show the witness E3/130, which is a Khmer version of the statute, and D 366-7.1.187. I'd be grateful if these could be put up on the screen. And once we've got them up on the screen, I will indicate to you the page that I would like to look at.
សូមបញ្ជាក់ឡើងវិញម្ដងទៀតមើលឯកសារ D 360
The President, could you please repeat the document identification?
Yes. E3/130 and D366-7.1.187.
The President, thank you. You may now proceed.
Est-ce que je peux
Can I give hard copy in this courtroom, please?
សារពី
The President, you may proceed. The court officer is now instructed to fetch the document from the prosecutor and hand it to the witness.
Je vais laisser quelques instants.
Let me leave the witness a few moments to look at the document. If he could please look in particular at the 30 articles of the statute after page 0044, 2247 in Khmer. Before them you have an introduction which concerns the fundamental principles and political stances of the party in the new socialist era.
Monsieur le témoin, est-ce que tout à l'heure
Mr. Witness, just now when you were talking about the fact that you were aware of these statutes and that they had been published internally and that you knew about a certain part of these statutes, do you recognize the document that is before you as actually being the statute of the Communist Party?
Right.
Response. Yes, the content of the statute, according to the best recollection of mine, when I had to educate people on this, it is really true. It is the statute of the CPK. However, I had only briefly studied the material and I don't understand the full content of the statute.
nous allons
If that's all right, we will focus in on one or two points contained in the document. In page 0044, 22, 53 in Khmer to 54. It's point 2 on the page. In French, it's 00292916. And in English, 00184024. This page has the title Fundamental Principles and Political Stances of the Party during the New Era of Socialist Revolution and the Construction of Socialism. At the end of section 2, it says that the party represents the interests of the Khmer nation. If there were only workers and peasants, according to the party, what place would be given to those considered under the regime to be capitalists, bourgeois, feudalists, landowners, or imperialists? Could those people come into the party?
Response. I would like to respond to your question according to my knowledge. Having heard this, I can see that the writing of the text is what we had to educate people about. I have no further knowledge of the other forces or what you mentioned, because in my education session that I offered, we were talking about the national forces, and the people who joined us included the monarchy, the king, and I was pleased about that. However, I don't understand why such a document is now written as what you indicated. I don't understand it.
D'accord. Alors,
Very well. On the same page under 3, it says, in this strategic context, the Communist Party of Cambodia has to defend the results of the revolution, defend the country as necessary, and the work of building the country properly. It's the second paragraph underneath point 3.
alors, il y a ici deux principes qui ont été...
So 2 principles have been put forward here. One is to defend the revolution and the country, and the other is to build the country. First, do you know who the country and the revolution had to be defended against? Who was the threat to the revolution?
Response. I still maintain my understanding in accordance with the old principle which means to attack the imperialists, promote the living condition of our people, and to protect our sovereignty. And I have no further understanding beyond this.
Est-ce que, alors s'agissant
All right. Well, staying for one moment on this defense of the revolution, were there external enemies or also internal enemies? You're telling us about imperialists, but are these external forces, or are they forces that could also be concealed within the party and within the country?
បាទ
Response. The forces I just noted refer to the struggle forces who joined hands in the fighting. They were the Colonial forces and the Americans. And that's all I understand, and I don't know what happened at a later date, apart from this.
Alors, on va aller plus loin.
Going on then to part 6. So it's 00442255 in Khmer. In French it's 00292917, and in English 00184025. So this is point 6, and in the second paragraph it says that the party must protect the revolution as much as possible against all activities and trickery, direct or indirect, overt or secret, which has the intent to destroy the party by all means. All Angkar bodies and party members must be good and clean and be pure politically, ideologically and organizationally, by having a clear, clean, consecutive and constant personal history. And if you go just above that in the first paragraph of section 6, it says that the party was established according to the principle of democratic centralism, and then it says that the party has severe and unique discipline, and it fights against the abuse of Angkar discipline. So, let me ask my first question. Did you talk about party discipline to the masses when you were indoctrinating them, or when you were trying to convince them to support the revolutionary movement and to support the party?
Response. Having heard your question put to me just now, it relates to the internal affairs of the party and the popular mass affairs. First, as I may say, it involves the internal party's affairs. With that, I and other people were not allowed to know how the party managed itself. In my capacity, I think I was at the lower level too low level to understand this. Secondly, we regarded the information for two types. First, for the internal party and for the popular mass. So with the popular mass, we had to quote and put them in our words to make sure the people could receive the information. And we had to be careful with imparting these words or text to the popular mass, because they had to be simplified so that people could understand.
And what did you tell the masses with respect to the discipline that they had to observe? What was the definition of discipline? What did you mean by it?
Vinay that
discipline which we instilled in the masses is that people had to be on time, and they have to observe the working hours as well, and they had to be economical, and they had to endeavor to produce the surplus in addition to the to produce production that can feed themselves, but instead they could produce some surplus to send to the front as well.
Est-ce qu'au niveau de la moralité, est-ce que
And in terms of morality, were people free to do as they wished? Were there any directives that were issued with respect to moral conduct to be observed either by members of the party or by the masses?
សូមបញ្ជាក់
Response. Can you please clarify the question? Because when you talk about morale, what do you specifically refer to?
ខ្ញុំមិនទាន់យល់ច្បាស់សំណួរ
I do not quite understand the question.
mais la question était de savoir
In terms of discipline to be adhered to, was there definition of good moral conduct? Or was there also a definition of what was considered less good or bad conduct?
Response. The moral conduct in that context was that people must not womanize or steal other people's property. If they had any problems, they should report to the competent authorities, and if they did anything that was wrong to the people, they had to apologize. They had to ask for the people for even a single chili. They must not steal even a piece of chili, because at that time we did not have bank notes, so we had to ask people for anything that they wanted. So that was the moral conduct expected out of us, but in reality it varied depending on individuals at that time.
D'accord. Alors,
Very well. Now, staying on the same topic of discipline, to attend unit meetings or branch meetings or daily meetings and assemblies, Was this something that was mandatory for members? Were members obliged to attend their cell or unit meetings?
A response. Generally, certain intervals were set for a meeting to take place. But if the person was busy for certain reasons, then it was not compulsory for them to attend. For example, if they had to take care of their wife delivering the baby or so, then they were not obliged to attend such meetings. But as for the implementation of the discipline, I don't think that I could determine whether or not people abided by the discipline 100%.
Dans l'extrait que j'ai lu, on parle aussi de...
Now, in the extract I just quoted, there is constant reference to pure biographies, good conduct, clean conduct. Who under democratic Cambodia would be considered as having a pure biography? And what consists of a pure biography?
A response. I answered to that question, but it was based solely on my understanding. But I dare not say that my answer was correct. By pure in this context means that we did not commit any misconduct. And in addition, whatever information or instruction from the authority to disseminate information to the lower level, we did just as was instructed. Thirdly, in our communication and management of properties or disseminations of foodstuff and other materials for the masses, then we deliver it efficiently and appropriately. That's what is the quality of being pure.
Est-ce que, quand on parle...
And does a pure or clean biography also mean that an individual comes from a particular social class amongst the peasants? Does having a pure biography mean having relations with the peasant class or coming from a particular place or class?
A response. Pure biography, as I said in my statement earlier, one, we had no record of being theft, for example. This is one of the criteria of being pure. Secondly, we did not exploit any other people or took advantage of any people's property or belongings. And thirdly, we did not abuse alcohol or committed any immoral acts. So that was the reflection of what they had done in the past, and then if they had not done those kinds of misconducts, then they would consider those people with pure biography. And again, with the masses, there are party branches which were tasked to observe the biography of their members.
Thank you very much. This now brings me to the two last articles I wish to address. The first one concerning Article 1, membership to the party. The ERN in Khmer is 00442257. The French ERN is 00292919. And lastly, the English ERN is 00184027. I'll just give you a few moments to identify the passage that I'm concerned with. Under the first heading, the first criterion for qualification, Article 1 deals with criteria for joining the party. The first condition, and I will read points B and C, which in the document reads as follows. Must be of a good class pedigree, in particular be a member of the working class, and having successfully strived to build the revolutionary movement. Once again, what is the base or original class, and what's considered a good class according to the stance of the party?
Response. Again, I base my answer on my understanding, and I don't think that I understood everything, particularly on this particular section of the statute. By good class pedigree, it means that this class does not possess any private property, and secondly, this class has had good records of their performance before, and then they came to work together with us.
Alors le point C dit...
Point C reads as follows. Must have good and clean life morals, and be politically good and clean, and have absolutely no affiliation with the enemy. Therefore, my question is, once again, I'll just repeat what I just read. Or rather, my question is, to have connections or affiliations with the enemy, could that taint a pure biography? Or could that denote or be indicative of a dirty, unpure and unclean biography or moral misconduct?
Response. There were two criteria for pure biography. One is they had good records for their performance in the past. And secondly, another criteria for the pure biography is that those people might have had some questionable biography, but when they started joining them, then they started to perform well, and then this was considered as people who had pure biography.
D'accord, alors...
Very well. I wish to now lift another passage from Article 2, which is entitled Duties of Party Members. Under Article 2, Internal Duties, which in Khmer 00442261. The French ERN is 00292922, and the English ERN is 00184032. Point E talks about secrecy and the rule of secrecy under internal duties. Always and absolutely strive to maintain party secrecy with a high stance or degree of revolutionary vigilance. As a cadre of the party, you were responsible for training and for also providing explanations on the absolute duty to maintain party secrecy. Is this correct?
Some
Response. The principle of maintaining secrecy is embodied in this statute, and when we address the masses, we also respect this principle of secrecy. So in that period of time, people had to mind their own business. So we were responsible for proselytize or propagandize with the people with what we were instructed to do. We must not go beyond the boundary of our responsibility.
Est-ce qu'il n'y a jamais eu, Monsieur
Mr. Witness, were there ever any situations in which you were fearful of breaching this rule of secrecy? Did other members of the party have any fear over violating this rule of secrecy or disclosing any secret information to the public?
But
Response. Yes, it was a normal situation. We had to work within our job description. We could not breach the rule of secrecies beyond our principal role.
Est-ce que ce devoir de
And was the duty to maintain secrecy so strong and inculcated within the Khmer Rouge mentality? To this day, it is difficult for you to not be somewhat bound to it. To this day, do you still feel an obligation to maintain this absolute secrecy?
សូមជម្រាបជូនបាទ
Response. To date, I have not been under any pressure at all because I have already rallied the royal government. and I also joined force with the Cambodian People Party, so I do not feel any pressure anymore. So I think that I am operating in a more freely now.
Je vais maintenant aborder une question concernant les...
I wish now to ask you a few questions with respect to West Zone Assembly meetings, particularly as it concerns Sector 15 and 22. Which cell belonged to you, Mr. Witness? What was your cell or unit called, and where was it located?
មន្ទីរដែលខ្ញុំចូលរួមម្ដងម្កាលជាមួយនឹងការប្រជុំបើកទលេងហ្នឹងដោយខ្ញុំបាន
For the open meeting, it was held in Chumkadong, as I said earlier. And as for the venue for the meeting of branches, which I also took part, was somewhere in Chatteras Mountain along the river bank.
Et votre cellule, est-ce que c'est...
And was your cell the propaganda and indoctrination cell, or did it belong to a particular geographical unit or cell?
សូម
Response. The branch with which I worked did not have a solid foundation because we just emerged from the war. During the wartime, we merely had a small hut with a leaf roof. But when the war was over, we did not actually have a solid foundation for this branch. Other than that, we had a more firm structure, like we have the zinc roof. But we did not have not even a single signboard beside the hut.
D'accord.
Very well. Did you take part in criticism and self-criticism sessions, which were also really commonly known as introspection sessions? Did you take part in those types of meetings regularly? Did they take place at the cell level or elsewhere?
The so-called criticism or self-criticism was conducted in each branch. They convened this sort of meeting in order to give members the opportunity to self-review themselves, what they had done and what they need to improve. So those who were listening in the sessions would give constructive comments, and by taking those constructive comments we could do everything to improve ourselves. And as to how much they could do with all the comments made by their fellow members, then it was up to individual members.
Est-ce que ces réunions faisaient...
And were there summaries to these meetings? Were minutes drafted for those meetings, and were those types of documents then conveyed to the upper echelon?
As minutes were taken, normally the chairman of the meeting would sum it up, and then they report it to the upper authority. In that report, it would say some things like these members have already said that they would improve this area of work or so.
Est-ce que vous pourriez répéter?
Sir, could you please repeat the first part of your answer? What we heard was that the chairman of the meeting reported on what people said during the meeting. Did you add anything else that I may have inadvertently missed?
Basically, as I think what you heard was correct. The chairman of the meeting would sum the minutes of the meeting up, and they would draw the good points and weaknesses of members, and then they also flag out the problems that hindered the performance of members, and they also sum up the comments made by other parties, by other members, and then they would forward this report to the upper authority.
Est-ce que c'était des réunions, ces réunions de...
Were these criticism or self-criticism meetings feared or dreaded by members who had to criticize their fellow members or even themselves?
It was the discipline if we were dedicated and we were compatriots or patriotics to the nation and the people, then that was what we had to do. As for the fear, as you mentioned in your question, generally people had fear, and if they had weaknesses, they were concerned, they were worried. When people flag out their weaknesses, they were worried. It was not the fear per se, but they were just concerned that they had done something bad or not well.
Est-ce qu'il vous est arrivé, monsieur?
Mr. Witness, were you yourself ever concerned or taken by a feeling of fear when you were working in the West Zone? Did you ever experience any moments of worry or concern?
Response. I had never been in the West Zone. I remained in Sector 15 all along. Response. I was worried about the plans that had been rendered to us to implement, and we were afraid that we could not implement them. And I had to ensure that people could cultivate rice, to plant enough rice to feed all the people.
Est-ce que, Monsieur le
Mr. Witness, did you also participate in biography meetings, either inside the cell or within Sector 32?
Response. Please repeat your question.
Est-ce que
Either in the cell or in Sector 15 or 32 afterwards, did you take part in biography meetings in which each person had to sit down and write their biography?
Response. Yes, I did. I personally mainly had to report to the branches about what I had done, and I did attend such sessions, and other people also joined me in reporting on the historical background of ours in the sessions. The President interrupts. Mr. Prosecutor, we thank you, and it is now appropriate time for today's adjournment. The court will adjourn. The morning session will be resumed at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We continue hearing the testimonies of witness Nikan. Questions to be put by the prosecutors. Mr. Nikan, since your testimonies are not yet complete and the chamber wishes to continue hearing your testimonies until tomorrow, and duty counsel for Mr. Witness Nikan is also invited to come to the court to assist him, and the following day when his testimonies are still needed, court officer is now instructed to coordinate, assist in particular this witness, working along with the vessel unit to ensure that he has proper accommodation and have him return to the courtroom tomorrow. Security personnel are now instructed to bring all the accused persons to the detention facility and have them return to the courtroom by 9 a.m. With regard to Mr. Ieng Sari, if he shows the intention that he continues waiving his right to be present in the courtroom and asks that he be allowed to observe the proceedings from downstairs in his holding cell for tomorrow's session. With the written document produced to the chamber, he will only be brought by the security personnel to his holding cell, not directly to the courtroom. The court is now adjourned.